Hello, fabulous friends, fans, superstars, patrons. Now we're a go. Now this is happening. I am here. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you guys so much. I'm sorry for the 3 minutes of technical difficulties. I love you for waiting. I've been having so much fun doing Synchronicity University Masterclass with all of you, and really, really grateful in a lot of different ways. Like, I've been grateful to connect with amazing teachers like today. I'm also really grateful to have this interaction with superstars and patrons. And I've been just really grateful to get to talk to interesting people and to share this community experience with you all as we talk to really amazing, interesting, accomplished people. And Sam Geppi is absolutely one of those very accomplished people. He has a new book, Yoga and Vedic Astrology. And I met Sam recently. Well, not that recently. It was back in October. I met Sam. And right away, I liked him. He's a good guy. He's got great energy and really, really loving guy. And I'll tell you, one thing about Sam that's really amazing is that actually Masterclass is because of him. Like, he's the one who contacted me, and he was saying that I'd really like to do something with you. I'd really like to be interviewed by you. I've watched your interviews. So there was lots of love, lots of acceptance, and lots of encouragement as soon as I met him. And his astrology is very much the same also, but he kind of radiates that. So it's really very exciting to me. I really credit him for getting me back into interviewing people. And so here we are, really. So I feel like he was the seed that started Masterclass, and here we are. And I would never have known how amazing this experience would be if it wasn't for him. And perhaps some people out there are going to feel that about astrology. They wouldn't have known how amazing astrology could be if it was not for Sam Geppi. So again, his new book is Yoga and Vedic Astrology, and he's going to talk about, I'm going to ask him about his life, of course, but he's going to talk about some universal spiritual principles in astrology that apply to Western and Vedic astrology, and he's going to take your questions also. So let me bring him online here. Everybody okay? Everybody doing good? Yay, Tara says hi, C says hi. Really glad that all of you are here. So here we go. Let's bring on Sam. I'm going to start the video, and I'm going to start his audio. So hopefully he'll be joining us in 1 second. There we go. Hi, Sam. Are you there?
Hey,
Hi.
how are you?
There you are. Yay.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for those amazing words. That was very nice to hear. I had no idea that I was the catalyst for new interviews and stuff. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, because like I said, I would not have known. And so I have no doubt that with your astrology, I mean, just with your presence and with your conversation, you inspired me to get in touch with something that I was doing and I loved to do and I had disconnected with. I have a feeling, just knowing you, knowing your posts, having met you, I feel like it's very likely that your astrology does the same for a lot of people out there. So really grateful. And I do love your videos. I just think you have this amazing, very unique voice. Really happy to have this time with you.
Oh,
so let's take it. Yeah, of course. So let's take it back to the beginning, because I always like to do that. My son is in the 8th house, so I always want to know where it started, what happened back in the day. So tell me, how did you start with astrology, and especially what led you to Vedic astrology?
Okay, well, actually, I started the sort of journey that led to astrology back when I was 19 years old. Actually, I started just doing a lot of intense meditation, and I was actually raised in a very sort of rural area where I wasn't exposed to any of this stuff. It just happened very spontaneously, and I started reading the books of. At the time, he was called Rajneesh, and then he later became Osho. And that was one of the only books that you could read back in the mid-'80s. And it was mainly all about meditation. So my whole foundation for all of the metaphysical principles started with that. Before I even really got into astrology, there was 5, 6, 7, 8 years of just really immersed in that. Then I was a musician for a long time. So I'm kind of a sort of musician guy. I actually never went to college. I never really wanted to. I, was like meditating and playing in bands and writing songs, that kind of, presence and life for decades, really. Then, by and by, I started getting into yoga more as we became more exposed to it, because all of my meditations and all of my sort of spiritual heritage was Indian. So I really knew about all of the practices and all of that stuff before I even got into astrology. Then around the end of like the late 90s, that's when I got back into this stuff hardcore, mainly because of the internet. And I redoubled down on my yoga practices, and then that led me to really studying the Indian astrology a lot more. Frankly, I was always interested in the Western astrology, and in the Western astrology, I totally get that both systems work, but I'm Cancer sun with a Scorpio moon, Gemini rising in both. But the paradigms of Vedic astrology really made more sense when I started studying it, at least for me. Of course, we all sort of approach it personally first, and I started to understand this. And the main thing with the Vedic astrology, what really got me interested into it, of course, it was in sync with the Indian culture, with the Vedic culture, and that paradigm of my spiritual language. Because we all have a sort of spiritual language and understanding. And this is what I tell people: both systems work, but for those who are into the practices and the culture and the spirituality of yoga, Vedic astrology is the astrology that's in sync with that same spiritual tradition. So that's the way it was for me as well. And then I started just to really practice and study the Vedic astrology with a lot of focus. But the thing is that all of the astrological teaching was put on top of about 20 to 25 years of Vedic practices. So for me, it wasn't like, I always studied astrology, then one day found Vedic, and then sort of tried to get into practices or yoga. Actually, all the practices in yoga and all of the cultural stuff preceded the astrology by about 20 years. So that's why with my approach, it's the sort of integrity of the Vedic and Indian structures are more foundational than anything else. And they're universal, just to say the last thing and then I'll stop. And they're universal to the Western as well. It's just that we use different language in the Western world to convey the same principles, basically.
So define Vedic. What does that word actually mean? Because it does seem like the way that you talk about it and the way that you came to astrology, there's a very integrated world view that I hear you talking about, that it's not just about what's happening with astrology, but it became part of your expanding spiritual practice. So define the word Vedic and how that fits in with this expanding understanding of spiritual practice. Yeah,
great question. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump into that. It just means from the Vedas. Vedas are the ancient books of India. They're the books of ancient India, I guess. And the knowledge from the Indian culture that includes yoga, Ayurveda. Ayurveda is their medical system. And then there's a thing called Vastu Sastra, which actually led to Feng Shui, which is the science of direction and sacred architecture. And then, of course, the astrology, which actually in the tradition itself, it's called Jyotisha, which literally means the science of light. But it was coined Vedic astrology, I guess in the early 80s by a few of the astrologers that came to the West. It's Indian astrology, just the astrology of the Indian culture. So Vedic means from the Vedas. And so that's just the sort of term that's a sort of catch-all for that Indian culture. And so it's that body of knowledge. And by the way, here's a book.
Oh, yay. Yes, we're absolutely going to talk about that book. I did want to say that.
Yes, since you did mention it.
I'm so excited about that book. Yeah, I did absolutely mention it because a lot of what we're going to talk about is that book. But I did really love how you talked about this idea of a spiritual lineage, because this is something that I really came to understand many years ago, that we all, it's like whether it's a spiritual lineage, whether it's an intellectual lineage, there is sort of this connection that we are building on the ancestors. And some of those connections are going to be like our physical ancestors, but then we also are connected by spirit, by intellect, by these different parts of our human existence. And we are building on that. We are adding to that. And so I love that you were able to listen to that and trust your intuition and take you where it was that your spiritual ancestors wanted to take you.
Yeah, and one of the main differences between the two astrology systems, or really the worldviews, is that in the Vedic or the Indian approach, not just to astrology but to life, everything emanates from spirit. Everything is from a spiritual and an ancestral origin, whether we know it or not. It's just it's just sort of cooked into the spiritual cake that we've incarnated. There's reincarnation, there's karma, there's past lives. We're an emanation of spirit, not of form. Form is a reflection of spirit. And, again, it's not to say one is better than the other, but I know a lot of Western astrologers, frankly, that don't even want to talk about, karma, reincarnation, who knows, don't really get into all that. I mean, most sort of believe in it, but in the Western psychology and in the Western worldview, it's not really a given. And in the Eastern worldview, that's the origin point. That's where we start in the East. And again, that's just much more in sync with my whole sort of approach. So it was very easy to just kind of land in that. When I started to study Vedic astrology and I started looking at the texts, it can be very hard to read the Indian Vedic texts because they can be very dense, because they're really built around all of these structures and formats. And if you don't know what those things mean, they just sail over your head. But if you know what they mean, then it's like, oh my God, this is like the keys to the kingdom. This brings together all of that philosophy into a structure where then astrology becomes the science of the karma and what exact karma is coming now, what exact soul lesson is awakening now, and what that actually means. So it's very integral in that sense. And it's built right into the books. Yeah.
Let's see the book again. Now let's see the book. I'm very excited about this book. I believe that you and I both are going to be at the IVC conference in Kolkata in late January.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm really looking forward to hearing you present, and I am going to get myself one of those books, a signed copy from you. It looks incredible. First of all, it looks beautiful, which is amazing.
I always make sure my books look good. This is my first book. Here, now we'll block me out. Just look at my book. Okay.
The Ascendant.
That's my first book that was written in 2005. 2005 it was released. And then this one took about another 10 years. Took a lot.
Yeah. But the best books can take a long time. People don't realize that books are a lot of work.
My God.
The thing I love about writing, though, is that it's immortal. It becomes part of your legacy forever. Like long after we're gone, we have contributed to the canon of knowledge.
Like
and so and that's what
it's
I love.
A lot. I respect anyone who gets a book done. After you've done it once, you realize it's like, even if you have all of the information together, of course there are typos and stuff, but then just organizing it, especially if it's organized properly, it takes it's a lot of work, but
but very rewarding, of course.
Yeah.
So tell me about yoga and Vedic astrology. Tell me, what is the book about? What do you outline in the book? Yeah.
So actually, the first, I think it's like 87 pages, is I don't even really talk about astrology proper, like planet signs, houses, what are called nakshatras, and how to do astrology until about page 90. It's about almost a 400-page book. The first almost 100 pages are about all of the universal principles which have to do with the sacred astronomy. Astrology is really sacred astronomy. And this is universal. These are the universal principles to Western or Vedic astrology. The astrology systems are just ways different cultures read the message of the divine universe. But the universe itself is this divine matrix. So I talk about the sacred astronomy of the sun, moon, and earth and how they're related to each other, and how spirit has unfolded over 4.5 billion years. It took a long time for our bodies and mind to incarnate on this plane, so that we can cognize our experience and actually evolve, and so our consciousness can evolve and our karma can evolve as a result. So I explain those things from the yogic, Vedic perspective, but again, they're universal because they were also in the Greek philosophy and the Roman philosophy. All of the ancient dharmic cultures understood the same things. And then I actually get into two of the most sacred texts of yoga, which are the Bhagavad Gita, which is basically the story of Lord Krishna, and the Raja Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. I'm not actually a trained yoga teacher. I taught yoga for about 7 or 8 years. I got trained in yoga as a yoga teacher in 2001. So I'm very steeped in